everyone, Jessica here from Stitching Colours and welcome back to my little corner of the internet. So today I have been working on Wizard Septimus, which is a Heaven and Earth Designs chart based on the artwork by Jan Patrick Krasny, and this is stitched 1/1 on 25 count using CXC thread. So I am working on the last row of boxes, well, the last two technically rows of boxes on this page, and you'll see where this blue is coming in here. It is where the very top of the hood is of the wizard. So that is a very exciting moment. But today my main focus, talking wise, I think is going to be on my evolving plans for the year. So I am planning on doing what we're kind of calling Mega March. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it yet, but daily I'm going to either spin a wheel or pick names out of a hat and stitch on whatever it comes out. So I think what I'll do is, it might be at the very end of my updates, and I will just show that part of choosing those pieces for the next 2 weeks, and hopefully this will keep me accountable. I know in the past when I've tried doing the whole spinning a wheel for a piece, I am shocking for deciding, no, I don't really want to work on that piece, and spinning again. Yeah, you can imagine how well that works out. So this time I'm hoping that by filming it and putting it up as part of my updates, I can hold myself a little bit more accountable. Because I will be changing projects every day, I will have to see how it goes, but it might be better off having an update every week in March. We'll see how I get on, rather than every 2 weeks, just because if I do it every 2 weeks, it might as well almost be a whip parade, depending on whether there are repeats picked out. So the way I'm planning on doing it is there can be repeats of pieces during that time period, just to make things interesting, I guess. One thing it will be, however, weekends will not be included, because I will be working on whatever my Saturday piece is, whether it is still the Dragon Race into the Night or not, I'm not quite sure yet, because we're still early in February. There's every possibility, which is very unlikely, I have to admit, but it's possible, I might actually finish the last 2 pages on Dragon Race into the Night. It just depends on how I go for the rest of February working on it. I know I said in my last update that this Wizard Septimus may not get a lot of progress, but I was looking at it after I finished and went, it is so close to the hood and actually getting something other than stars and background. So I kind of just went, well, he's kind of a fancy folk, so anything can be a fancy folk if you put it in the right context. But we'll go with that. And I need to lift this up a smidgen. Okay, I think we're good. But where did I put the needle? Over here. I am shocking, and because I don't see the point in using needle minders, so things get interesting. But to be honest, even if I do use needle minders, they just end up sitting on the piece. I don't actually end up using them as actual needle minders, so they're kind of pointless to me. Yeah, and it always makes me laugh. Even though I know there's no right and wrong way for CXC thread, I still go and check it. So we'll get to that. So you may have seen I have put Wizard Septimus's threads on purple thread drops that I printed with my 3D printer. I am still not really printing at the moment because it is still quite warm. We had a couple of cooler days, and now it is heated back up. So we'll get there. It was kind of almost feeling like autumn had arrived early, but not quite. Today was pretty hot, especially earlier on when there was no wind. So things look to be cooling off a bit out there. Clouds are coming over, so we'll see what tomorrow's week actually ends up looking like. It is, I think it's meant to rain, but I don't know. Just in case it is going to rain, I ducked out earlier and mowed my lawns. That wasn't all that fun. I always seem to pick when it is still quite warm to be mowing the lawns, but the problem is I don't want to hold off and do them later or do them early in the morning, because the only real time I can do them is in the weekends or after work. And there are quite a few families with young kids in the area, and my neighbours, well, my side neighbours are elderly, and my back neighbours have kids, I believe. I don't know, I never see them. They're kind of not really neighbours. There's no access around their property but they're just over the fence because it's from the other street. But I know how frustrating it is to either get woken up or such with people doing yard work and other things like that, and would rather not be the one causing the problem. So I kind of don't tend to do it any later than 6 p.m, but recently it's just been still too hot at that point. All the grass had gone to seed, so, and browned off in a lot of areas, but we've had some rain in little showers just with that humidity, so it wasn't quite brown, and it had been just enough to keep it growing. So we are in February. I can't believe we're in February. And before we know it, it's going to be March, which is why I am considering all of my plans for March. So, as I was saying before, I had to adjust the camera a lot. I am planning on switching my pieces up. I did pretty well working on pieces for 2 days back in September last year, so I thought I would try a little bit more of an extreme version of this and see how I get on. It'll be a bit more random because some pieces might randomly get picked out for more days than others. The difficulty is going to be the piece that I have planned for a finish for the end of the year, which is Planets Align 5, 6, something along those lines. Can't remember what number exactly it is because there are quite a few of them. But it kind of doesn't really fit in with Fancy Folk February. It doesn't, so it's kind of only going to get some work possibly on a Saturday and Sunday where I haven't planned on any of the other pieces, which means I think I'm going to end up behind coming into March, so I'm going to have to work out how to deal with that. I'm considering making it a Saturday piece, which might work, but even on Saturdays, sometimes I don't find I get that much stitching time. So, time will tell. I guess it just depends on how quickly my new starter at work ends up getting all sorted for doing ear monitoring by himself. We're still a little bit away for that yet, but at least for doing the number of samples that will be. I don't know, maybe my problem is that I struggle to let go. Unfortunately, when I started, there was a lot going on in terms of there was more work than there was staff and some very long stressful days, which resulted in people being thrown in the deep end, and we just had to do our best to swim as fast as we could. I swam all right, but other people didn't cope so well. I mean, but my experiences have been from that. I would never want to put anyone in that position, and so I kind of am shocking for probably holding them back a little bit more than they should, because I know how stressful it is to be put in that position, trying to do the work and provide a service when reality you've had minimal training, such as being abandoned in a site 3.5 hours away from our home office and told, go survey this building for asbestos. Great. That was a fun time. We were staying there, but an emergency came up in town that they needed to deal with. So, yeah. That wasn't a good time after having half a day of training on that particular item. So, I guess I was traumatized by it. I held it together and got the work done, but I was pretty traumatized by it for years. And I hated surveying as a consequence of it. And it's probably been only in the last year that I've gotten over that mental trauma from it. Just, I don't know. I was always very hesitant during surveys, and I've just had to get over it and get things done. And I guess doing that, I've had a bit more experience and time doing it, and therefore I guess I kind of have gotten over that mental block. But for a long time, I would just about refuse to do any of these surveys. I went into the other side of the work that we did, which was clearance assessments and a bit of the occupational hygiene side of it. Doing other kinds of testing, desperately trying to avoid surveys. That wasn't probably the best option, but I wasn't coping. I mean, this was back in 2017 that little situation happened, so you can tell just how stubborn I was, shall we say. And at the time, management kind of accepted. They said, okay, obviously surveying is not for me, and that is how I got away from it. Unfortunately, 6 months ago, when I ended up being the last surviving team member in our branch. Well, even before that, I was having to go out on a few here and there, but I could manage that. But being the last surviving team member in our branch, I just had to accept it and get over my mental little issues and move on and get those surveys done. And I've actually found in doing so, I don't have a problem with them. I think the problem was that at the time I had about a day's worth of training, and this was a very big client, and we still have that client to this day, but at times I have no idea how. So yeah, it made things interesting, and now I am training someone on how to survey, and so we'll still be doing that for quite some time. Normally it takes about a year before they're fully trained on everything, but surveying, they can be out on their own realistically within 3 to 6 months. The clearance side of it normally takes a bit longer because when you're dealing with asbestos, if it's a Class A removal, which is a friable asbestos, you have to have licenses through WorkSafe, which means proving training and capabilities and all of that stuff, which takes time to get all the paperwork together. So it's kind of like the number of sites they've been on, the number of different situations, kind of. Let's just say removal companies aren't always the simplest to deal with. And nope, we're still working on this 939. So very shortly it will start blending more into some of these other colors, but I am still in the section with the 939. The way I work on a lot of these areas, especially when I've got bulk colors, is by kind of stitching both diagonally and horizontally across those blocks. I've said it before, I am absolutely paranoid and terrified of getting lines in my stitching. I haven't actually had any lines ever, but yeah, it's definitely something I am terrified of, because I guess I'm not sure whether I'd be able to bring myself to continue with a piece if I saw lines in it. I mean, it's bad enough with the lighter colours of stitching, especially if you have a large amount of white and you can see the grid lines from the 10 by 10 grids in it. But you get used to seeing those. It's a different thing, or at least it seems a different thing, to actually have grid lines from where you're stitching because of changing tension. So yeah, fun times. So as you may or may not be aware, in March is the start of autumn for us in the southern hemisphere, or spring for those in the northern hemisphere, which means I will be starting Celtic Autumn by Lavender and Lace, and this will be on another Chromatic Alchemy fabric. I need to have another look at it. Originally I planned on stitching it on an orangey coloured fabric, kind of like an autumny colour, but I want to double check the colours in the piece, that they're not going to be lost on the fabric. So I will need to do that before the end of the month, along with checking I've actually got all the threads. I'm shocking for thinking I've got them all and putting orders through and then either stealing some threads for another piece or not actually ordering every single colour. So that will be a thing to double and triple check. Okay, I am shocking when I'm doing these stitch with me's for not marking off my stitches, so I'm just trying to keep track of where all the colour starts changing. So this is, the row above it was the last full row of 939 across these blocks that I'm working on, because there is another colour here. Nope. Why is that purple there? So another thing I guess I will need to sort out before the end of the month is getting Celtic Autumn in Pattern Keeper. So it takes a bit of time getting all the photos as much as you can lined up, but I find it a lot easier doing it that way than it is to try and do it a different way. While I've tried markup, I haven't been all that successful with it, but I think that's probably due to me not spending enough time on it before deciding that I didn't like it. I was probably very quick to judge it based on what it was before all the most recent updates, but I guess I'm really comfortable with Pattern Keeper and how it works, even with paper patterns when you import it in. And yeah, so I kind of don't think I really ever gave pattern markup that much of a chance. I pretty much went straight from GoodNotes, which I was using beforehand, to Pattern Keeper, and kind of haven't really looked back since. So, I mean, originally I was very anti Pattern Keeper because I am an Apple user, and it was a difficult change to make in the first place, actually using Pattern Keeper and not using an Apple device. At that time, I had no idea how to use Android devices. It was very confusing, the 3 buttons that most of them seem to have. So I learned, but for a while I was using a Kindle. It had a very small screen and started to lag whenever you had any of the bigger pieces or just a large number of patterns in Pattern Keeper. So I went and bought a Samsung Tab A. It is a 10-inch screen, so it is fantastic. I love it. It doesn't lag, and I'm very comfortable using it. So I feel like I get more stitching done when I'm using Pattern Keeper than if I'm using a pattern when I'm using a paper pattern or a pattern that's not compatible. So that could be just me, of course, but we're getting there. Hold on one moment. I have not been marking off my diagonal. Close enough. They just get highlighted and I will come back and work out exactly where I am after. Because this little purpley shape is kind of where things start going a little bit different with the colours. I guess one of the things I love about Pattern Keeper that I have not seen being able to use, I mean, you might be able to do something similar in markup, but I've not seen it, is that if you select a colour, you can only mark off stitches of that colour. That means I can just kind of swipe across the screen and we'll select several different stitches, but that will only be selecting stitches of the colour that I was working on, like for example here, which is 939. It makes it easier. I don't have to think. It also kind of gives me the patterns of the shapes I guess I'm stitching, I very much kind of stitch and count based on those. Once I've got a few stitches in, it's very easy to go, oh look, we've got something similar to a right angle triangle or a diagonal line and things like that, as opposed to counting. I think it sometimes makes things quicker, but sometimes it doesn't, because I have to work out exactly which little one of those shapes I'm talking about, especially if you've got little pairs here, there and everywhere. So I guess with Pattern Keeper, because the stitches change colour as you do them, it kind of helps with that. But I believe Markup does that as well. So some of this probably goes back to just being used to what I'm using. So you would have seen me debating, do I go down on my diagonal? Do I go back up to the top of these boxes? But I'll just continue this diagonal because I think that'll probably bring me to the edge of this thread, and then I can just get a new thread and probably end somewhere over here, which will be great for going into the next set of boxes with this colour when it comes to it. I feel like I've had a good start to this year, even though I feel like it's slowing down a little bit now, just because work is getting a bit more chaotic and I am probably doing a few more hours and a bit more things in the weekend for stitching. Of course, the heat that we've had has not helped. So I've definitely noticed over the last couple of days, as it's been a little bit cooler, that Luna definitely noticed it, because she has recently been sleeping in the spare bedroom under one of the windows where it doesn't get the sun just because of the angle of the house, whereas I came home from work after work for the last few days, and here she was lying happily on my stitching chair like normal. So we had a little bit of a debate, and if I remember, I will put the picture in and show you one of the things and how she tried to discourage me from moving her. She did not want to go. She was quite happy where she was. So, you know how it is. It was quite entertaining. But I guess that's one of the things with ragdolls, is they have amazing personalities, and it was like the look she was giving me was as if to say, don't you dare move me. This is my chair. So it was fun. Just let me finish this strand. Okay. I need to mark off a few more stitches. We are really getting through these boxes, which is great. but I think before finishing the 939, I'll go do some of the other colours. So yesterday when I started working on this, I finally moved it over to the printed 3D, oh dear, the 3D printed thread drops. And so I labelled them and put one skein of each colour on them, and then I use a ribbon through the top. So you can see here, it just keeps them on a loop, and it means that they're all in order and I can find them. So this is a different blue, still blue, unfortunately, because we're still in the sky area. But some of these other colours coming up may be something else. I think this is kind of the shadows around the hood. It's not quite the hood yet, but it is getting close. So that is very exciting because it kind of goes diagonally over here. So yeah, we're just kind of in the shadows and things around it. But I'm very excited to see some other colours. We'll start to see some things happening before I go back into sky for the rest of the top row of pages. So while it's very exciting to get to that point, it is going to be quite saddening. I think the rest of the sky across the top row of pages, at least anyway, is probably a bit more boring than what I have had in the sky so far. So it's going to be saddening, but at least I'll have something to look at. It's why I'm kind of considering making this one my next kind of focus piece to get the top row pages finished, because I really want to get some more progress on this piece, because I think as I get more progress it's going to look amazing, just because there's been all of this dark in the sky and things like that, and then you'll just start to get all the contrasting colours in. So I think it's going to look fantastic. But it's getting through all that sky first. In terms of, I guess, items that this piece has got in it, this piece is probably a little bit less busy than the rest of Jan Patrick Krasny's pieces. If you think about things like the magical journey, I think that's what it's called. I kind of think of it as a Hogwarts piece because it's a train. But it's called Magical Journey, I believe, which Charting Creations have got the licensing for. And I have that piece. I kind of want to start it, but at the same time I am aware that it is very busy, and therefore it's gonna feel like a long time before I start to see anything meaningful, and I'm just not sure I'm ready for that at this moment in time. So it's going to stay with quite a few others, as in the kitted up, or mostly kitted up, but not to be started quite yet. Nope. And this is the piece I find the worst for, in that I kind of almost try and puncture the fabric in the middle of the grids more than the rest of them. I'm not quite sure why. It's still 25 count, and it is still 1/1, and still using the same needle, or the same brand of needles. Maybe it is a slightly different needle, but even when I've changed needles, it hasn't made any difference. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe it's just the colours that I'm working on. I'm not sure. Time will tell if that continues to be the case later on. So, where are we? Yes, that is the next row. I just can't wait to get to the hood. Even though I only get a tiny little section on this page and a tiny little section at the bottom of the next page, I believe. Yeah, and then that's it. Oh well. So I worked today and did my lawns. So I guess the rest of the evening I can stitch away and have some peaceful time. Luna is off sleeping somewhere else. Recently, at least the last 3 nights in a row, just with the colder weather, she's actually been sleeping right by my side on my chair, sharing my chair with me. That's kind of her. When I've been stitching in the evenings, so she's been a happy cat. But I think, unfortunately, earlier I annoyed her by trying to pat her while she was trying to sleep. She left. But she was so soft. And how could I resist patting her? It was at that time that I realized, yeah, I needed to pick up my stitching, because clearly I needed something to do rather than just sitting here on YouTube and Facebook. They are very addictive, as I'm sure everyone has realized. But I am back and stitching, so we'll see how we get on. I don't think I will get as much stitching as normal, just because I don't know, I just haven't managed to get much stitching done today, even though it's Saturday, and normally I would. And I only had a couple of hours of work to do. It's kind of like a split shift kind of thing. You do an hour at one point, and then you come back 4 hours later and do another kind of hour. But unfortunately, there were a lot of events happening in town, so it meant that I couldn't park where I normally do, because the road was all closed. That is not in the right spot. Needs to be over one. And it meant that I had to kind of wade through all the crowds, because there were markets and things in the centre of the town. So yeah, and things, I think it was for the event also in that area in the centre of the octagon was something to do with the World Cup of sports. I'm not 100% what sport it was for. I thought it was the FIFA, but I'm kind of going, I don't think so. Here in New Zealand, football is not our strong suit. We don't tend to do all that well, but I don't know. I was kind of focused on more getting where I needed to be and being very confused at what was going on because the roads were all closed all around, so no parking, and it kind of looked like they were doing a I kind of want to say a carnival, but it's not really a carnival. But there were heaps of stalls set up and a few little games like throwing balls and rings and things like that. Yeah, I kind of skirted right around the edge of it and went where I needed to be. I was carrying enough weight with all the equipment I needed, let alone having to try and do that as well. So yeah, it was interesting, and it was still running when I came back in the afternoon to collect all of the air monitoring pumps that had been running for about 5 hours at that point. So I had been hoping that by 3 o'clock in the afternoon that it would be all finished, but apparently it didn't finish until 5 or 4. 4, I think. By that point, it was already dragging on enough, and I didn't really want to go home and then come back again. So I waded back through all the people. Admittedly, it was a bit quieter, but I still could not park where I normally do, and had to carry all the equipment back to the car afterwards. So there's only so much I can do, especially at this time of year. I thought normally the worst times are when university graduations are running because there's just no parks anywhere. But we're not expecting any more graduations and ceremonies until May. Hang on, have I stitched my tail in? No, not quite. So we're free of graduations until May, and I will not be looking forward to that kind of time period because it goes crazy. All the parents and things like that come visiting, even though there aren't that many ceremonies in May because it's the mid-year graduation for those that must have either started a semester late or changed, or for some reason or another they needed an extra semester before graduating from university. Yay for them. I know when I did mine, it was quite frustrating because you had to do 7 papers for it to be considered a full academic year of studying, and therefore not be required to pay student loans and still be eligible for all of the assistance and etc. But things have changed since I was there, in that they get the first year free. Of course, this means that there's a lot of people that are probably not choosing as carefully, I guess you'd say, of their classes in the first place, and they are kind of considering it almost like a 4-year degree instead of a 3-year degree, and that the first year is just a chance to change about things and decide what they really want to do. In some ways I can see that is great, and other ways I wish they would have made it the last year that was kind of free. It kind of would have made more sense, because they're getting the students that have already put in the hard time for the previous years to get their degree. You know, it's at that point, especially for some of those students doing a master's, that they're debating whether they really want to do a master's and whether they can afford it, just because of the costs that they've already paid. So there's a lot more of that happening, but when I was doing it my last year, I needed 5 papers to graduate and get all the points I needed. But the problem with that was they were a mixture of first and second semester papers, so I had to kind of do a full year, so I had 2 extra papers that I did not need. But I enjoyed it. I did some extra papers, and sorry, my wrist is itchy. It's under my watch, so. Hi, Luna. She's come to see what's going on. Not sure how long she'll stay, but yeah. I think she's decided she wants a pet now. And I think you might be have seen her tail. She had a bit of a fun time earlier on. She was chasing after a fly. Here's me getting back after working and then picking up a few things from the supermarket that I needed. And I sit down and she's running around a loopy. Here's me not knowing quite what's going on originally, and then she ran and jumped on the footstool, jumped on my chair, jumped on the arm of the chair beside me, and unfortunately she did not retract her claws very well, probably because she was just a momentary landing spot before she jumped onto the windowsill and gave me a bit of a scratch on my leg. That's not so great. But hey, she was chasing a fly. She was desperate to catch it. There aren't many flies that I get in this house. So when she gets one, she goes loopy. So looks like she is lying down, probably ready to take a nap next to me. I'm always amazed at how well she'll shear at some points with my chair. But sometimes she is terrible. Especially when she's here first. She doesn't want to share. She wants the chair all to herself. So and doesn't appreciate it when I try and move her over a little bit, because she likes lying right in the middle of the chair, or either curled up in a ball or stretched out. And I'm sure you'll see the picture that I am definitely going to put in this time. It's not going to be like the last time that I completely forgot to put the pictures in, because I don't know why I forgot to put the pictures in, but I did. So, assuming I remember, you'll have the pictures that I was mentioning last time, which was the Mountain Air fabric that I was originally planning on putting the Celtic ladies on, and also Luna. So, fun times. And I'm pretty sure the reason that she's meowing is because I am talking. She's normally pretty quiet in the evenings. She settles down, takes a nap, but I guess I have headphones on half the time, so maybe I wouldn't actually notice if she was being rather vocal. Okay, now she's gone behind my head and to go sit on the window frame, and I hope she hasn't disturbed the camera too much. I don't think she did. I think she went underneath it, so I think we're right. But yeah, based on the feedback from the last one, I have kind of kept the camera closer like I did at the start last time, but I don't know. We'll see how we get on. The app I am using for mirror screening seems to be working pretty well. It's just a matter of whether I'm actually remembering to look at it, or whether I'm just focusing on my stitching, which I do seem to do and completely forget about. So, okay, Luna is back. Obviously, there's nothing interesting to look at outside, which does not surprise me considering it is dark outside. And you're lucky you've nearly hit a tail in the camera, but not quite. But what she seems to be after is a bit of attention and a pat, so I guess I will leave you all to it and talk to you all another day. So I hope this was an interesting little video, and I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend, and that the next week is productive for you in whatever way you would like. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Alright, bye.